Hi, I'm Missy Mackin from Vermont Works for Women. Some of you know me, and we've decided to try to put Enrichment Night online for you. And we're really hoping that you enjoy this. And I'm going to give a little introduction just for anyone who doesn't know what Enrichment Night is about. This is a monthly event that Vermont Works for Women hosts at the Chittenden Regional Correctional Facility. The event allows participants to hear from professional women in the community about their work and to learn about barriers and challenges they face along their path, and maybe to consider tools or strategies that have helped the presenters reach their goals, overcome challenges, or be successful in their career. We usually meet on the third Tuesday of the month, and obviously we're not doing that now. So for our first ever online enrichment night, I'd like to introduce you to Melinda White.
Hi, Missy. I really appreciate you asking me to do this. My name's Melinda White. I am by profession an MAT care coordinator and navigator for Northwestern Partners in Hope and Recovery. I also wear a number of different hats in our community. I am fully invested in being active in our community, so I won't go through all the hats and titles unless the rest of our conversation brings us to that point. But thank you for asking me to be part of this. I feel really grateful.
That's great. Thank you so much. And just to clarify, I think everybody knows, but can you explain what MAT is, please?
Absolutely. So MAT is medication-assisted treatment, and medication-assisted treatment is used for a number of diagnoses. One of the most commonly known is opioid use disorder. There's also MAT available for people with alcohol use disorder and other addictions. So the clinic that I work in is an outpatient opioid clinic. So when we look at like the hub and spoke model in the state of Vermont, we're considered a spoke. Actually, we're considered a super spoke, which is exciting because our location had been exercising as many additional services a spoke could possibly have until we actually got a hub in our community, and we've continued to provide a wide variety of services.
And you're in St. Albans, correct?
I am, yes. So our clinic is through Northwestern Medical Center on Catherine Street. So we're off-site from the Northwestern Medical Center itself, and we're on Catherine Street in St. Albans.
That's great. Thank you. So I guess I'd like to start off by asking you, I know you've had a fascinating path to where you are today, and I don't know if you'd like to talk about that chronologically or start with today and talk about maybe the steps that you took to get there and why you do the work that you do and that brings so much to the community.
Sure. I mean, I'd be happy to go back a little bit just to give a summary of the history that brought me to the position I'm in today. So I am a person in long-term recovery, first and foremost. So what that means for me is that I haven't had to use a mood or a mind-altering substance since December 28th of 2011. That was definitely not my first attempt, but that has to date been the most successful of continuous recovery and sobriety. Previous to getting into recovery, my employment was typically corporate, I worked for A.N. Derringer for a while, for Silhouette Tone. My background was in business and finance. It definitely wasn't in recovery or human services. But after, having a number of challenges of my own, I did eventually, accumulate 4 DWIs. I got myself in a lot of trouble, got involved in a lot of really dangerous activity. And I did become addicted. Alcohol was the first, thing that came to light, but it was opiates that had brought me to my knees. And I did go to my first treatment center in 2009 and had done Brattleboro Retreat. And it was a great program. I stayed there and continued to do their IOP. But I did end up relapsing, and I went back there, and that wasn't enough for me. So I ended up going to a program called Teen Challenge. Despite the name, it's for adults. So I went to Teen Challenge in Philadelphia, and I stayed there it's a minimum of a year program. It varies from person to person, but I completed after 13 months and came back home to Vermont. And I had worked at the Covered Bridge, which at the time the covered bridge was and it's still, a covered bridge is still around, but the house I worked at was in St. Albans, and it was to house women coming out of prison, women in recovery coming out of prison. But then the women's facility was moved from Swanton to Burlington, so Covered Bridge was no longer able to continue having that home. And I went back to corporate work. I didn't stay well connected to recovery and sobriety connections, and I eventually ended up relapsing. And I had a long run of just as with many stories, things getting worse and worse. And I ended up getting in a car accident, totaling my car at 1:30 in the afternoon with a BAC of 0.38. I had nodded off and drove under a semi because I had mixed both alcohol and opiates, and I hadn't been using alcohol. And all of a sudden, between the combination, I nodded off, got another DWI, and I would have to say what is it that worked this time? I went to Maple Leaf Farm, and it was a great program, and but I followed the suggestions that were given to me. I finally listened and followed to every single suggestion, and the suggestions that are really not that difficult. They're not difficult. It's very simple, and it makes it easy to think that, well, I'm smarter than this. I can outsmart it. I don't need to do what everybody else does because of X, Y, and Z. And, as somebody with addiction, I'll speak for myself. It's almost like I thought I was terminally unique. Like there's nobody out there who's been through what I've been through. And the reality is we're so similar. Our experiences might be different, but the way that we process and respond are so similar. So the difference was that, going to treatment on December 28th of 2011, I completed and followed all the suggestion. And as I continued in my recovery, I knew, like I knew my own name, that there's a purpose for me to have survived everything I survived, and that it is to be of maximum service to, my higher power and to the people around me. And I started on the path of, being in recovery, working in recovery, joining boards of directors for the Turning Point, for Vermont Recovery Network. And that's where that journey kind of got started.
That's really interesting. And so many women I've met who have had these challenges express a desire to work with folks, to go back and give back to the community and work with folks who are in recovery. So aside from, working with Turning Point and joining boards, do you have any other suggestions for how women could get into this sort of work that you do?
Absolutely. So, my as far as my work experience, in my personal recovery, I was attending a lot of various meetings, counseling, 12-step groups. I was doing a lot of work for my own recovery. And in doing that work, and even people who have gone to treatment, we learn a lot. When we pay attention to what the education that's being given to us, we learn a lot. So by working at Turning Point, that gave me an opportunity I was attending and using the services, plus I was working there. And that's a great starting point for people to look at, maybe their local recovery centers. But one thing that I had learned about that was extremely valuable, and even today, some of the best skills that I learned, it's through the Recovery Coach Academy. So I did go through the Recovery Coach Academy, and that was extremely helpful because while my journey of recovery was through a couple of different paths, there's so many paths to recovery. And I think that, the Recovery Coach Academy is what helped me to really strip down any bias I might have on what anyone's path should be. Some people's path does include medication, some do not. Some include 12 steps, some do not. Some include going to a clinician, a psychiatrist. So there's just so many different ways, and the Academy does a beautiful job of highlighting all those paths, accepting and recognizing that, I have no idea what somebody else's path is supposed to look like, but my job as a recovery coach is to support them in the direction they want to go. And it's basically to give them resource and referral, and then to be a listening ear, like to just be a good listener. That's one of the biggest things that anybody struggling needs, is for somebody to listen and to have a strength-based approach to ideas. So the Academy, especially locally, Pair Vermont, or Recovery Vermont, which is through VAMHAR, and VAMHAR is Vermont Association for Mental Health and Addiction Recovery. the academy that they do in Vermont is just stellar. Peter Espenshade is, a dear friend and coworker at this stage in my life, but he's the one who continues to schedule out these recovery coach academies and do the trainings, and they also do a ton of other trainings. So if somebody's interested to learn how they could start on this path to employment, I would encourage them to first off attend the recovery centers and take advantage of the groups that they do. There's things like MRE, which is Making Recovery Easier. It's a 6-session workshop. People get a certificate of completion, and you're able to learn more about the 12-step path to recovery. There's also another program called Smart Recovery, and that's done in the recovery centers across Vermont, as well as in intensive outpatient through Howard Center. It's a fantastic evidence-based approach to recovery too. So by going to the local recovery centers and accessing, and especially for the women who are in facility, if they have the ability to log in and do some of these groups online, they'll get great information and guidance on the different paths of recovery, understanding more of it and starting to build their education on it. But the Recovery Coach Academy is one of the things that I have to say is one of the most beneficial. It's a starting point. When somebody completes, it doesn't mean that they're ready to go be a recovery coach. We're in the process of Vermont right now of certifying recovery coaches, and we haven't completely finished defining what that's going to look like, the process. But we're following the national model that CCAR uses. So we're in the process of trying to even better define and create roles and professionalize that position. But in the meantime, people can at least get started and complete that academy. And then there's ongoing trainings from there, everything from ethics to boundaries. So that's what I would encourage people to do. One of the best resources, again, is to go onto the Recovery Vermont website and look for trainings that are available. A lot are free. A lot may have charges, but there's scholarships available.
One of the things that can be a great support or a great hindrance seems to be friends and family. And I'm wondering if you could talk about that a little bit.
Absolutely. So it's, commonly said in treatment centers and in recovery centers to keep an eye out for people, places, and things. It can be a challenge for some people who may go to, say, residential treatment, but then they come back to the same exact circumstances. So, that's people, places, and things are essential to be mindful of. I think mindfulness is probably the best thing that I can say, because to some degree, we can't change who our family members are, but we can change the dynamic of those relationships. And I can say for me personally that, going back and forth to treatment, nobody else in my family had addiction. Nobody else in my family had been arrested. This was very foreign to us, and it was foreign to me too. So to come out of treatment and try to, convince them how great things are now. Now I get it. I got it. I'm going to be good. And I put so much energy into trying to convince them into trying to ease their own fears, that the last time, I think what was different is when I came out of treatment and I was asked, are you finally done? Are you finally never going to do this stuff again? I was able to just be honest and say, you know what? I don't know for sure. But what I do know is that what I've done today and put in place for today, I believe I can get through today without picking up. And if I do the same thing tomorrow, I believe I can do the same thing. So I think it's a lot of it is that we want to appreciate what others have dealt with because of our addiction, the pain and the challenges. But it's also, if I try to take that on, if we try to take that on, how much we've hurt others, we're never going to have the strength to be able to actually focus on what's most important to stay in recovery successfully for another day. And that was something that I just learned, despite, there was some family that felt they were concerned about, you're going to all these meetings. What is she really doing? Is Melinda going and doing X, Y, and Z? And, I don't blame them, because there were times that was happening too, but I had to get to a point where it wasn't about pleasing people and taking care of them, because there are family support programs and other things that are available to the family members so they can stay focused on themselves and not hyper-focused on the person with the addiction. So I had to come to acceptance that I had to focus 100% on my recovery, but do it in a respectful way too, right? Like not selfish, but in a way where it's like, you know, the idea of you go on an airplane and they tell you to secure your mask before the mask of others.
Yeah.
And I remember when I used to hear that, I thought, well, that's horrible and selfish. If I had a kid next to me, I'm going to secure the kid and then I'll take care of myself. But you know, I understand now, being in recovery, the philosophy of I am not going to be able to give love back to my family if I don't have that mask secure. And that mask is my recovery meetings and my commitments that I'm supposed to do every single day. When we look at the other part of people and places and things that might be like unsafe friends, because of course I had a number of people that I was associated with that were not ready to be in recovery. And, you know, I did have to cut ties to those. And I even had a couple family members that, you know, they are able to socially drink and socially do things. And I had to step away, but I had to do it without judgment. It's not my place to judge that they're drinking and what they're doing. That's not my business. What I needed to do is just keep it focused on I statements that I just don't feel comfortable in this scenario right now, maybe down the road, but I'm just too vulnerable in new recovery. And of course, as time has gone on, I've been able to be at all of the family events and family parties, and it's fine. It's like it's become a non-issue. But in that first year, it was my full-time job was to stay in recovery, be in recovery. If I could work on the side, that's great. But I see a lot of people say, well, I can't go to meetings or my counselor, I got to work. I'm not going to buy it, because if you relapse and you pick up, you're not going to be able to work anyway. And you know, so I do get kind of tough with people that I help on that area, only because they're putting those things in front of their sobriety. If they put their family in front of their sobriety, they're going to lose them. If they put their job, if they put anything in front of their recovery, they're going to lose it. But if they can say, yeah, I'm going to do my recovery, and it doesn't mean it has to consume every hour of every day, but I'm going to do my commitments to stay balanced, and then I can give my all to my employer, to my family, to my friends. I think getting rid of old phone numbers, you know, it took me a number of falls and years to finally destroy my phone and not have access to those old phone numbers, because I would go searching through old phone bills to find those phone numbers if I hit a place of desperation. So we really have to destroy any connection to the drugs and the alcohol that we possibly can, because it's not something that is planned ahead of time per se, but all it takes is one weak moment on one bad day to, you know, make a bad decision. And as soon as we pick up, our brain chemistry is going to change, and we're not able to exercise all those other great coping skills because we don't have the ability to. So I do encourage people to be mindful of people, places, and things, and to look at it that it's not forever. With some of the family that I missed them a lot, but you know, they're in my life today, and it's healthy, and I'm strong in my recovery. So that's the thing, is build the foundation first, and don't look at things as being, well, the rest of my life I can't do this and that. You know, it's just for today.
Just for today. That's
Yeah.
great. Yeah. Do you think that recovery looks different for women than it does for men?
I think there are some things, because of who we are as women, that, you know, some of the things when I look at, like, you know, gender identifying, I'm a firm believer that it's really important for women to work with other women when it comes to like sponsorship and recovery coaching, because we there's a lot of things that we understand that a man can't, because it's just, you know, they have an experiential disconnect. So I think that it's more powerful for women to work with women and for men to work with men. And I also think, and it's not, you know, there are some cases where I know some, very few, that it ended well, but some cases where a woman did have a male sponsor, or vice versa. But most of the scenarios I've seen, it doesn't end well. And a lot of times it's not even just the fact of, well, are there going to be ulterior motives, or, you know, but it's just the fact that we can't connect on certain things that are essential to dissect when we're going through our recovery and going through our inventory of our past. And there's some stuff that we just can't unveil with the opposite sex, because they are not, they can try, they might genuinely be giving 100% empathy and trying to picture it. But at the end of the day, there's some things that they just won't be able to relate to, just like for us with them. We can't assume to know what it's like to be a man. But I do think that there are some differences. That being said, you know, I think as long as women are working with women as much as possible, the chances are going to be a lot better to get good, healthy guidance on from people who have gone through X, Y, and Z without picking up a drink or a drug. As far as resources and whatnot, I feel like, I don't really see where, I don't know, it's hard to say, are there less resources available for men compared to women, or less for women compared to men? I don't really spend a ton of time on the data. I mean, I can say that in Franklin County, we don't have a women's sober house. We have a men's sober house. So that's something I've been advocating for. I do think that there are some services that we don't have as much of for women. And I think that, sometimes we'll look at the numbers to determine where the biggest need is. But sometimes measuring by the numbers isn't always it's not the only measurement that ought to be looked at. I really feel like we could do a lot more for women, especially with sober housing and sober supports. But so it can be a challenge sometimes, even for me. It's gotten better over the years, but when I first got into recovery, most of the meetings I would go to were, old men. I didn't see a lot of women. I didn't see a lot of people my age. But that's really shifted over the years. More and more, we're seeing people of all ages enter treatment and recovery. So I think that's one of the blessings, is that for somebody who might be a little bit younger and just want to find with somebody they feel they can connect with that's a little closer to their age, there's not as much of a lack of that now as there was, 12 years ago and 10 years ago.
Yeah, that's really interesting to hear. And one of the things that I recall from some of the classes that we teach through Vermont Works for Women is the idea of when we talk about being assertive in the workplace for women, the idea that women need to believe that being assertive is appropriate for them, and that that's not something we're usually taught. And that idea of that we feel responsible for everyone else's needs before, we put everyone else's needs first. And that was one of the other things I was thinking when I asked that question about men and women in recovery, that you're talking about what you said a few minutes ago about, I need to do this for myself first. It's the oxygen mask.
I've seen a number of reports and statistics that show that while the volume of women that do struggle with alcohol use disorder and substance use disorder is a large amount, it's harder for women to come forward for help, and takes more because of the idea of, especially women who are moms, I'm a mom, I can't do this, I have to take care, so those are things that I don't want to say that men don't go through and feel. I just know that it's documented more when I'm looking at some of the reports that, women have a hard time being able to say, yeah, even the ones that I talk to often, well, I know I need help, I want help, but I've got kids and I've got to make sure they're taken care of. So I think by nature, we are built to be caretakers. We're built to be, to want to do for others. And getting into recovery, it was a stretch for me. It took me years to say, okay, I am going to be selfish with my recovery, because I kept hearing people say you have to be selfish with it. And I thought, no, I was selfish enough when I was using, like, I need to be selfless. But once I understood what they meant by that, doesn't mean selfish that I'm taking from anybody else. But I need to be selfish enough to say, if there's a birthday party and there's going to be a ton of booze and a ton of drugs, to be able to say, I love you guys. I hope you have a great time. I'm not comfortable with being there. It's not anything to do with you, but I can't do it. It's nothing to do with it. It's a me thing. And to be able to just put it that way, where there's no judgment, there's no blame. I think that's huge, is that there's a lot of negative bias that, our world has at times with people that are struggling with addiction. And there's all of those fears come into play. But I think that, as we have a caretaker personality, what I found, if I look at, my past to present and many other women I know in recovery, is that many of us started our life being passive and not speaking up and saying, this isn't okay. I mean, we weren't being assertive or aggressive. We were being passive all the time. And then for me, getting into my addiction, it went from too passive to, now I'm aggressive and I'm going to make up for all the people that hurt me. And, and then it's like, then you get in recovery and it's like, okay, let's find some balance, because aggressive's not okay. Passive's not okay. So how do we be assertive? And being assertive it's, as it's not about, trying to bully or push. And at the same time, we got to be able to speak up and be confident when we know what we're talking about, be humble to know that, I can be the first one to say, the more that I go in recovery and learn more, the more I realize I don't know. So, just to at least be confident enough to say that I don't feel comfortable with this. I'm not going to judge what others do, but I can't be part of this. If it's whether it's people coming out of jail and they want to see some friends, but they know they're not ready. And it's like, how do I tell my best friend who's getting married that I can't be in her wedding because I'm scared because I'm in recovery now? You don't have to give your whole scorecard. All you have to say is, I'm sorry, for health reasons, I can't go. Leave it at that. Same thing with, hey, you want a drink? And some people say, how am I going to say it? I don't want to tell them that I'm an alcoholic. And yet all you're going to say is, nah, I'm allergic. I can't, or I'm on medication. I'm not a fan of lying. So if you're on a medication, great. And just say I'm on medication, can't mix it. But otherwise it's like, I have an allergy to it. And that's honest. The disease of addiction is an allergy to alcohol. So I think that just finding the way to realize that we don't owe others ourselves, that we have a responsibility when we're in recovery. We have a responsibility to be of service at every opportunity, but not at the expense of ourselves, and being able to well define what that looks like.
Yeah. So true. That's amazing. Just to think about that idea of needing, self-care. And we didn't hear the term self-care until a couple of years ago. And everyone needs to practice that, male, female, and everyone, take care of yourself first. So I do love that. I just want to shift slightly because it seems to me that I've heard you were trained as a musician as well as being trained in business. And is that correct?
So I'm a musician for sure. That's, I hope I'm allowed to be candid. So for me, I say that's a gift from God, because I didn't exactly go to school for that or get training. And in school, I was in band. So that's where I learned how to read music. And the amazing Vern Colburn helped me when I was in high school with reading as well. And I actually have his daughter's piano is the piano I use in my house. So I got great instruction, but I never... it's not like I didn't go to school for it. The music saved my life. It was when I got in recovery, it just helped. It really saved me. It was a way, and is a way, to exercise self-care. And it's a gift for other people. So it's been a blessing.
That was kind of what I wanted to ask you about, whether that did give you, aside from just giving you something to do, whether it was helpful in sort of those spiritual ways, I guess, that, that feeding your soul sort of thing that music and art can do. Yeah.
I can say for sure. It's interesting because I grew up, my mom said I started playing when I was 4, playing by ear, and I play by ear by nature. I've learned how to read music, but I'm not somebody that can sight read. But if I can listen to it, then I can. So it's kind of backwards to most musicians. But when I was committed to my recovery after treatment the last time, I spent a lot of time doing music because it was healing. It was a great outlet. But the other piece too is I always had this fear because I loved music so much. And yet I was so scared that I would get judged by, a real musician, because I didn't go to school for it and I don't know all the theology. I went through what they teach you in high school, but I really didn't, know a lot of the quote unquote basics that a lot of polished musicians know. So I always had this fear of being judged that I'm not good enough because I didn't do it right enough. But getting in recovery, after what I went through, I was living in hell when I was in my addiction. So, I say getting in recovery, it didn't open up the gates of heaven. It just opened up the gates of hell so I could climb out. So being in recovery, I don't have fear of people the way I used to have. I'm not afraid if people don't like my music, Is it going to make me sad? Well, not really, because there's some music I'm not a big fan of. It doesn't mean I don't like the person playing it. It's just not my type of, so I've learned to not worry about what everybody else is thinking, and to not be so selfish with that gift, because it's a gift from God that I was stifling a lot for other people because I was nervous I wasn't good enough. And yet, I've been asked to play so many events and weddings and funerals and all this stuff. So I've learned to try to push that fear aside. And if I'm asked to play somewhere, then I say yes. I need to move forward with that and say yes. And even, under the conditions that we're in with COVID-19 right now, a lot of people are really struggling. They have a lot of fear. And I felt in my heart over the last couple of days to post live on Facebook. I've done a couple different songs. And, the one I did yesterday was No Longer a Slave to Fear. I didn't sing before I got in recovery. I never had singing lessons, never was in chorus. That's a gift that came in recovery. So it's a gift that nurtures me, but knowing that it nurtures others is what makes me feel like I have a responsibility to say yes as much as I can. I play for my local church. I play for restaurants. Like, I have to do that stuff because I can't keep the gift that God's given me without giving it away. And I've learned that the hard way sometimes, that I need to share it. So do I still have fear and anxiety when I play? Every Sunday, I get nervous. But as soon as I start, I just have to use, CBT and that thought replacement to remember, I'm not here to be judged. I'm not here to be afraid. I'm here to share what I can do. And at the end of the day, if I get too much anxiety and I pass out on the piano bench, then so be it. What's the worst I can have? It's like I really try to look at what's the worst case scenario. It's really not that big of a deal. And it chases away that anxiety.
That's great. Do you have a favorite piece that you love to play?
Oh boy, my favorite genre to play, if it's just me playing at my piano, is classical. But if I'm playing and singing, I love, worship music. I love Christian music. If I'm playing out and about in restaurants and in bars and whatnot, I love singing rock and roll. I love doing, contemporary. But if it's just my choice to just sit home and play, I love doing music by Lauren Daigle and by Hillsong and Carrie Job.
To wrap up, any last thoughts, anything you'd like to say to the women who are at the facility right now during this time?
Yeah. What comes to my mind is I remember being completely broken by mind, body, soul, and, including overdoses. I remember just being completely depleted. And I'd see these commercials on TV with, the women that are overweight and now they're thin and they're healthy and happy, or the women that were, in addiction and now they're thin and happy, and, all this stuff. And I used to think like, it's impossible. This could never happen to me. I would never be able, and I know when it comes to recovery, we live in a society that says, I'm not going to believe it until I see it. When it comes to recovery, you're not going to see it until you believe it. So for the women in facility right now, even if they don't feel that they are strong and that they are warriors and that they're victorious over any of their addictions or any of their issues, even if they don't feel like it, the feelings are real, but they're not reality. The reality is there's many people who may not ever experience what the women there are experiencing now, especially in the conditions we're in with COVID. And every day that they're in facility, they are building resilience, they're building strength, and the goal is to stay focused, to know that this is an opportunity to work on yourself to the best of your ability. And if you're able to do it in the conditions you're in now, just imagine when you're set loose in this world and you can use all of that talent and all of that strength and knowledge to be a force for good in the community. I never would have believed that I could make it a whole entire day, like a whole day without using something, because it was always something. Always had to have something in my system. I never thought I could have a day. And now it's, over 8 years. And when I was new in recovery and hearing people say that in meetings, I thought, okay, well, maybe you're not drinking, but you must be snorting lines in the bathroom. It's impossible that you can be happy. I just couldn't understand it, but I wasn't believing it. I wasn't believing it. So the thing is to remember that you're not terminally unique. And no matter how tired and burnt out and weak you might feel in any given moment, know that that's something that you can totally use to motivate yourself to become a strong warrior. And the stuff that we can do in our community to be a force for good is just amazing. It's a blessing. And quite frankly, for me, if I was choosing, hiring people to work in the field, some of the best workers I have seen, the best recovery coaches, the best women who did time, because of the resilience. So just know that Is it fun? I'm not trying to be fake and say, oh, you should be having fun. No, let's be real. It's a real challenge. But what I am saying is getting through that, and each day being able to say, even if I'm feeling kind of crappy, the truth is that I made it through another day today. Like, that's something to be proud of. So each little effort will build up. And when people say, I don't have self-esteem, well, do something esteemable. Do something nice for somebody else, especially if you don't like them. That's a great way to build some self-esteem. And then when we act with love, even if we inside we're like, oh, I really don't like this person, but I'm gonna give her this candy bar. But once we do that action, there's something that shifts in us psychologically. And we do start feeling better, and we do start caring for people that we thought that we didn't like. So I would just say, act with love. It doesn't mean the warm fuzzies are always there, but acting with love and respect will eventually shift, and all of a sudden you'll find that, wow, I do love these people. I do love people. I do love helping. I do actually care about this. So no matter how much anybody in there is struggling right now, and I know it's not easy, you guys are like amazing to get through each day the way that you are, and just know that you are going to come out of this and be stronger for it.
That's great. Thank you so much.
Good morning, everybody. I felt in my heart that I needed to do a song today. It's been planted in my heart for a good amount of time right now, because I know there's a lot of fear out there. I just want to remind people that God eliminates the fear, that perfect love casts out all fear. So the song I'm going to do is No Longer Slaves, because we're not slaves to fear. perfect love casts out all fear. Get your love from God. He's the only one that can get it cast out. And then love others. God bless you guys.